everybody. Welcome to this episode of Think Tank Thursday. I'm Candi Kelley and super excited to be filling in for Beth this week. On Thursdays, Trainertainment likes to take a little bit of time away from the doing and spend a little bit of time thinking. So today we get to spend that time with a great guest and a close friend of mine. But first, I've got to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Redemption Plus and Bowling Music Network, for sponsoring Think Tank Thursdays and all of our other digital adventures this year, including webinars. We're grateful for their support. So now we get to meet our guest for today. So why don't you introduce yourself, take a few minutes to tell everyone who you are and kind of what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Candi. I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you. My name is Joseph McNair. I am a partner and investment advisor with Warren Averett Asset Management. We are a fee-only investment management firm who helps our clients with all their financial decision making, essentially.
Awesome. Well, there's been a lot of talk about business finances and what are businesses going to do with their finances. So we thought it'd be good to take a few minutes to also talk about personal finances, because as much as businesses are thinking about it, I think a lot of people are probably thinking about their own personal bank accounts, investments, and such. And I couldn't think of anybody better to ask than you. So I guess we'll talk about the first one, assuming putting everybody on the same level field, basic guidelines for some personal investing in general, not just in a pandemic time to set yourself up.
Sure. And, there are some just kind of rules of thumb as a good groundwork, a good basis, no matter what level you're starting and no matter if you're a business owner or an employee. So first, I think, and you'll see that it's reflective in where we're at today, but a good rule of thumb is to always have an initial goal to build an emergency reserve or an emergency fund. Sometimes we'll call that a cash reserve. The purpose of that emergency fund is just what it sounds. It's to be there in the event that something comes up, some unforeseen something comes up, a loss of a job. We typically recommend that emergency fund is about 3 to 6 months of your household expenses. So that it's there, set aside, not subject to market risk. So I'm not talking about your investment portfolio. I'm not talking about your 401k. I'm talking about cash. Money market, savings accounts, things that can be converted to cash easily and not potentially going to be down in value in the event that we get a market downturn that happened to coincide with a job loss like we're doing right now. So you don't want market risk in those, but an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of your household expenses is kind of rule of thumb number one. And look to do that before you focus on longer term investment type goals.
So get my emergency fund built before I'm investing, and household expenses, not the income that I'm bringing in, but actually what it costs to run my house, pay out my bills and all of that for 3 to 6 months.
Exactly. Because, in an emergency, you're not going to have the surplus. What I'm really want to make sure is that I'm able to pay my obligations, take care of my obligations. So, in an emergency, that surplus isn't going to your savings account or your 401k. So, think about the cost that you're having to incur over that 3 to 6 month period, not necessarily your take home pay or your gross salary.
Perfect. Just wanted to clarify that there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got my 3 to 6 months saved up. I got a cash reserve, as you're calling it. Now I'm ready to maybe invest. Rule of thumbs there. What do I invest in? How do I break that up? Sure.
So first and foremost, know that your first investment objective should be to save for retirement. So as a population, we're living longer now. We're not necessarily working longer or not meaningfully longer. So what that means is that retirement is lasting longer, and retirement is that period of time where you're no longer drawing a paycheck. So and for populations today, that could be 30 to 40 years of time. That when you put it in numbers like that's significant, and that means living to age 90 or 95, which is a very realistic life expectancy. If you have this 30 to 40 year retirement to fund, yes, there's Social Security today to fund some portion of it, but it doesn't matter what your income level. Social Security doesn't bridge the entire gap. It doesn't cover everything that you were earning pre-retirement. So bridging that gap or keeping your lifestyle in retirement, being able to support your lifestyle in retirement is going to require your own savings. So great opportunities to save for retirement are if your company sponsors a 401k plan, utilize the benefits of the 401k plan. If you don't have access to a 401k plan and you're an income earner, you do have the ability to invest into an individual retirement account or an IRA. So those are two options to do a tax deferred savings. Each of those also have Roth options. So 401ks are company specific. So your company may not permit Roth, but if they do permit Roth, or if you're eligible for an IRA, you can do a Roth IRA, which means you put the dollars in on a post-tax basis, but they grow tax-free over the course of their investment. And when you pull them out, you don't have to pay tax on them. So pros and cons of each, probably too detailed to get into, but know that those are vehicles to save for retirement: 401k, IRA, and Roth. And then once you've exhausted those options, saving in an after-tax bucket is important as well. So an after-tax bucket is just a brokerage account that's not a retirement benefited account. So not a 401k or an IRA, but just an after-tax investment account. And it's important because as you get into retirement, if I'm pulling all of my income out of a 401k that I didn't pay tax on when I made the savings, I'm going to have to pay tax on that in retirement. And I can potentially see myself in a situation where all of my retirement income is subject to tax, and I end up in a higher tax bracket in retirement. And so there's just an opportunity there to, if I also save in an after-tax bucket, I can control my retirement rate a little bit, my tax rate in retirement a little bit more.
Okay. And I know your answer to this next question might be a touch biased, but do it on my own, find somebody to help me with all of that stuff. I feel it can get quite complicated.
It can, and certainly I'm in the business of helping people with their investments. But I'm not opposed to, not everyone needs professional guidance. So, if you have the financial wherewithal, if you have the discipline, more importantly, in my opinion, investing isn't rocket science, but instilling the discipline, making sure that when you invest for the long term, you stay invested for the long term is an important part. And a lot of people outsource that because that responsibility is tough. And when times get tough, it's hard to stay invested. It's hard to stay focused on the long term. That I think is one of the biggest values that a professional investment advisor helps with. But if you have the investment, resources are out there, and there are great resources out there for people who want to invest on their own. And I don't think it's a bad route at all.
Perfect. So what percentage of my salary am I supposed to be investing it every year?
Great question. And there's not, every situation's a little bit different. Some in the industry would define, I've heard the term hyper saver, and a hyper saver is obviously a great goal. I'd love to be somebody who's considered a hyper saver, who's focused on saving for the future. And those that I've heard use that term describe it as those who save about 20% of their gross income. So that's a great goal, to save 20% of your gross income. That would define you under in that world as a hyper saver. But I'd say start with your employer match. If you've got a 401k that gets it, the employer is matching, and you're looking for a place to start. Start by taking advantage of that match. Think of that as extra compensation, that all you have to do to get it is to put your own money that you need to be saving anyway, put your money in, and then the company matches it. So, that's a good head start and a good place to start. If that doesn't accomplish your goals, if whatever that company match isn't sufficient, and it's likely not, to meet all of your savings goals, and it's too big of a goal. Let's say your company matches 3%. You put in 3%, and they match 3%. So now 6% is going in. If that's not enough, and you want to get to 20%, but an extra 14% is just too much, consider adding to it on an incremental basis. So period of 1% per year until you get to that goal, and you won't feel the burden of making that increase like if you had done it all at 14% at one time. But take incremental steps and know that that's going to pay off over the long term.
Okay, perfect. You say when planning for retirement, I guess there are tools out there that will help you decide what your goals are and what percentage you should be at if you have different goals.
Certainly, there are tools out there. If you have a 401k, if your employer provides a 401k, you almost certainly have tools within that 401k to help you determine how much you should be saving. If not, they're great websites. Anywhere that you're going to open an IRA, particularly if you're going with a large reputable company, a Vanguard, a Fidelity, a Schwab, if you are using a large reputable company, there are tools out there for how to go about how much to save. Again, that 20% hyper saver is an awesome target. Your employer matches a target, but then those tools will also help you determine if this is the lifestyle that I'm accustomed to today, if I'm spending X dollars today, what do I need to prepare for in the future? So I would look to your provider for that as a good resource.
Perfect. So right now the world's a little crazy, as we know. People probably have their own personal investments that they have some control over. Maybe they could pull out if they need to or not. But what should we be doing with our personal investments right now?
Great question. And certainly we're getting that from our clients. We're getting it from our friends, from our colleagues. So know that if that's what's on your mind, you're not alone, and you're not alone by a long shot. I think first and foremost is to just pause, take a deep breath, and not make any rash decisions. The market reacts quickly to unknowns that come about as quickly as this pandemic did. So I think first and foremost, don't make a rash short-term decision that's going to impact a long-term plan. So take a deep breath. We talk about short-term and long-term. It's kind of like what I talked about. Your emergency fund is a short-term. It's 3 to 6 months. Long-term is saving for retirement. Generally when we're doing investment planning, we're doing management, we're looking into the future. We're planning for something that's going to happen at some point in the future and may last 30 to 40 years. So when we think about long-term, I don't want to derail my long-term plan over something that has a short-term impact, even if it's as significant as a 35% decline in the market. So we saw a 35% decline in the market in March. Since that time, the market's recovered about half of what it's been down. So, it's moved so quickly. And had I made a move in March as a response to what I thought the market was going to do, I very likely would have missed all of the recovery that April's provided so far. So don't make that short-term rash reaction to short-term phenomena.
It's funny how separate industries can use the same terminology for different things. We in our industry will say for customer service, don't make a short-term decision or short-term rule or something that causes, some type of discomfort to your customer. Don't make a long-term decision about that for a short-term problem. So that customer that's arguing or whatever is unhappy with a rule that has done you well for most of it, don't change it for that one person because that's a short-term problem. So interesting. Okay, earlier you were saying, short-term versus long-term. Term as in 10 years is long-term. If I need to retire in 5 years, I maybe need to talk to somebody, or what is the difference there?
So yeah, when I think about short-term decision-making, I'm thinking even shorter than 5 years. I'm thinking about, that emergency reserve type, the 6-month emergency, a year out. Those are very short-term things. Essentially, I would say, if you're thinking about short-term decision-making, it's how long can you foresee? I'm going to need X dollars in this period of time. I can't reliably predict what dollars I'm going to need in 10 years. That's a long-term thing. But what I'm going to spend on this landscape as I look outside my window that looks terrible, that's a 6-month investment. What I'm going to do 6 months from now, those things that I can see are short term. If I have a known need, that's a short term thing. So other things that are less predictable or longer term, and maybe that's a 3-year number, but I don't think there's a real specific definition there. But maybe another point that may get to is the closer you get towards needing your retirement dollars, certainly you want to be mindful of the need for those dollars is becoming real. it's shifting from long-term investment towards a shorter-term need. And because of that, you want to be focused on reducing the risk. So just like my emergency reserve, money I might need immediately for 3 to 6 months, that has no investment risk. I'm not subjecting it to market risk, I'm keeping it in cash. The same is true the closer I get towards retirement. I'm going to need some percentage of my portfolio on an annual basis in retirement. I'm going to need it as cash. I want to reduce the risk in that part of my portfolio so that the cash is there and I'm not worried about whether the market's going up and down over that period of time. So we do want to look at reducing risk in the portfolio the closer you get to knowing that you have a need.
Okay, perfect. So far, right now, I should breathe, pause, and think about it. I shouldn't run out and do anything crazy because I'm in it for the long term. I'm not retiring tomorrow, and I don't see a need for that money right now. Are there some positive things you can do, like, I guess stock is kind of probably cheap right now.
Sure. There's a couple positive things. Let's kind of take them to twofold. First, you mentioned stock is cheap. Perhaps it is. And had we had this conversation a month ago, I told you the market was down 35% a month ago. It's recovered some portion of that. We can't ever reliably predict where the market is. Is it going up or down tomorrow? Is it, what it's going to do in the short term? We just don't know. But perhaps it's a buying opportunity. Historically, when we've been in recessions, and most indications are with almost certain now we are in a recession, those have been historically good buying opportunities for equities. So potentially adding equities to your portfolio during a recession, a good opportunity. Warren Buffett, the probably most prominent investor of all time, is quoted as saying, "Be greedy when others are fearful." It's quite prevalent that fear is kind of the growing emotion or the most prevalent emotion right now in our society because of what's going on, because of uncertainty that creates this fear. And history has shown that being greedy or buying into markets when there's such fear has proven to be a good investment decision. But again, the caveat, we don't know where the market's moving in the near term, but historically those have shown to be good buying opportunities. A more certain thing that you can do today to take advantage of the economic environment is take this opportunity to reset your balance sheet. So we talked about building your emergency reserve. If you find yourself in a position where you have cash, then make sure that emergency reserve is there. Another thing is interest rates are at historically low levels. Because of that, banks are crazy busy right now doing a lot of refinancing. So if you have a long-term, if you have mortgage debt, if you have long-term debt, consider whether or not it makes sense for you to refinance that debt and take advantage of today's historically low rates. So just over the last 18 months, rates have moved very meaningfully. And that could be a couple $100 a month savings. It's hard to predict where that number is. Each person's going to be impacted a little bit differently by the move in interest rates, but that could be, it could provide you the opportunity to reduce the term of your mortgage, say from a 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage, or it could provide monthly cash flow. If your need is monthly cash flow, it could reduce the amount of your monthly payment if there's an opportunity for you to refinance.
I know. I always think about getting out of debt faster rather than
exactly. And if that's your goal, then by all means, lower interest rates are going to help you accomplish that.
Yeah. All right. So we can reset our debt. We could add to our portfolio if we find ourselves with the wherewithal to do that. What if someone does need cash right now?
Yeah. That obviously there are a number of people impacted by what's going on. I just saw unemployment numbers this morning. 15% unemployment rate is crazy. There are a lot of people who are really in a financial emergency right now. So what happens if you're there? First of all, if you were fortunate to have built that emergency reserve, know that now's the time to use it. So
don't be scared.
Exactly. Don't be scared to access it because you put it there and you're like, I'm not touching this for any reason. this is that reason. So know that, things are tough, and that's when that's why the emergency fund is there. Use it, relieve the emergency, and then we'll focus on rebuilding it on the backside of this. So first and foremost, look to that. Second, I talked about interest rates being at historical lows and really a great opportunity. We're fortunate that to this point, real estate prices haven't been meaningfully impacted yet. It's not to say they won't be, but certainly they're still. So we're at a point where we have high real estate values and low interest rates, and that means a lot of people have equity in their home, and the opportunity to refinance or borrow against that equity. So if you have access to a home equity line of credit, that can be an opportunity for you to relieve the financial emergency after you've exhausted your emergency reserve. You could relieve the financial emergency by accessing the equity in your home at a low cost, because we're at historical low interest rates. So know that if you're someone who can handle debt responsibly, the equity in your home is an opportunity today, because interest rates are so low. It's kind of an affordable way to access cash. And then the CARES Act, which was passed into law just last month, had very numerous terms or benefits. The Paycheck Protection Program for employers, the rebate payments to individuals. So there were a number of those opportunities that came out. But one of the kind of lesser opportunities that came out of that was an expanded borrowing capacity in your 401k. So if your employer permits 401k loans, there's the opportunity, there's some benefits in that act that expand the opportunity to borrow from your 401k. And not only to borrow, but the repayment terms are stretched out an extra year. So instead of typically you have to pay back a 401k loan over a 5-year period, you get an extra year to pay back a 401k loan. So there's some expanded borrowing capability. The other thing that was expanded was a special withdrawal provision, where if you attest to having a COVID-related hardship, you can make a withdrawal from your 401k and repay that over a 3-year period. So, fortunately, typically with hardship withdrawals from your 401k, you don't pay them back. You're subject to paying a penalty and paying the tax on it. With these COVID-related withdrawals, you don't have to pay the 10% penalty, and the tax is only incurred if you don't pay it back pro rata over a 3-year period. So you have, a third you have to pay back in year 1. If you don't pay it back, you pay tax on the third. And each subsequent year, a third is due back into the portfolio. And if you don't pay it back, then you pay the tax. So some expanded capability to access your 401k.
It's interesting though, for your industry, you guys are probably talking about those things a lot. I haven't even heard about those two things.
Yeah, so much of the attention has been towards the individual rebates, and especially for business owners towards the payroll protection program and the other benefits towards business owners. Our world, our firm helps business owners with their 401ks. So, those provisions are something to be mindful of. Talk to your 401k provider. If you're an employee and you talk to your employer about the options within the 401k. And, I do want to make a note as kind of broad financial planning. Borrowing from your 401k, taking withdrawals from your 401k is usually a measure of last resort for us. We don't recommend borrowing from your 401k. We certainly don't recommend emergency withdrawals or hardship withdrawals from your 401k. But this might be just that emergency that is, in this particular case, it's the unforeseen that sometimes it's just warranted. So if that's the case, the change in the law fortunately makes the opportunity hurt a little less. You've got 3 years to pay it back now. And the reason we typically advise against it is because, my advice of don't let a short-term issue impact your long-term plan. Pulling out of your long-term investments is an impact to your long-term plans. We typically advise against that as much as possible. But if it's warranted, know that this legislation provides the opportunity to pay it back into the plan and minimize the damage to your long-term financial plan.
Awesome. Okay, so I make it out of this. All is well, but maybe I wasn't where I wanted to be when all of this stuff started. The pandemic happened, and I was able to make it out, but struggled a bit during once. And I want to make sure that I prep myself for future emergencies. Is there like a 1, 2, 3, like do this first, do this next that you would suggest, or what would you tell your friends and your clients?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to our basic guidelines. First and foremost, build that emergency reserve. Know that that's your lifeline. And that's not you relying on someone else. It's not you relying on unemployment. It's not you relying, in Florida, we've had this issue with unemployment, and many states have, but with unemployment checks, the claims have gone so high that the unemployment offices can't process them. So, I don't want to be reliant on getting an unemployment check or reliant on a rebate coming through so first and foremost, build that emergency reserve. That's your lifeline that you're providing for yourself. So work on, make as your primary goal, building 3 to 6 months of emergency reserve cash that you can access in the event that income stops. And then second, be mindful of, I say your balance sheet. Think about the assets, the things that you own, and the debts that you owe, and be mindful of creating a gap between them so the assets are worth more than your liabilities, because that provides equity, and that equity can be accessed in this event, like I was talking about the home equity line of credit. And if you have equity, consider going ahead, and particularly if you're, again, responsible credit users. I don't want to give you a line of credit if you don't have the discipline to make sure that you use it responsibly, because that again can derail a long-term financial plan. But if you have the financial discipline to use a line of credit responsibly, and you can access that line of credit, if you go ahead and establish it, you're not sitting here waiting on a bank now so that you can access a home equity line of credit. It would be there. You wouldn't draw any balance on it until you got into a reserve. So, creating the equity and then having the ability to access that equity is an important kind of preparation for emergencies as well.
Oh, that's a good tip, because banks are probably overrun right now. If you wanted to get that now, you're probably on a wait list. No one can get to you right now.
Right. So the same banks that were busy doing refinances as interest rates dropped were busy doing home equity loans when people needed emergency, and then the CARES Act passed and they're doing payroll protection loans, and that absolutely consumed every bank in the country. So if you're the one waiting in line with a new home equity application, it can be a really tough time.
Yeah, I'm just not a priority with that application right now.
Exactly.
So, okay. Everyone who comes on Think Tank gets asked the same question, which I'm really interested to ask you, because I've sat on a beach with you while you have studied for test after test after test for years and years. All of us are playing, and you have this huge book studying. So I know you're big about growing yourself, but that was then, and now you're all grown up and have the job and everything. So what do you do on a consistent basis to help grow yourself and or others?
I don't think you'll be surprised at my answer. It's read. It's diversify your sources of information. Never stop learning. So read, and I don't care if it's fiction. And in fact, it should be some variety of all: fiction, nonfiction, news, and most importantly, sources that you don't typically agree with. Like, read other opinions. I think it makes us more well-rounded thinkers. We're broader in our depth of, and broader in our knowledge and deeper in our depth of knowledge. So become better informed, and it makes you a more well-rounded thinker. Read. I'm sure you get that answer a lot. I hope you get that answer a lot anyway.
We do. What about for others? I know there's quite a few charitable things you do, and then leadership things that you do in your community of Pensacola. So what do you do for others?
I give, and I don't. Sometimes it's financial. I think the best gift you can give is your time, and to the extent you're going to give, give wholeheartedly. Instead of, for me, I like to give my time to a smaller number of organizations so that I can make a meaningful impact. So I can go deeper with that organization or deeper with that effort. But the same is true for individuals, my team members. You know, I want to be a resource for you. So, you know, come to me, ask questions. So give of your time and take a vested interest in those entities or those people that you're giving to.
Awesome. Those are awesome answers. And speaking of books, because Beth usually plugs her book, Beth's book, People Buy From People, is actually on sale right now for $9.99 at the Trainertainment website. So for the foreseeable future, while we get through this, it's what we can do to try to help give people back and get them ready for sales when this starts back up. So thank you for your time today. I want people to know if they want to connect with you. I know you've been doing some really cool things like this, that you can say, where can people find you if they wanted to just see what you were up to?
Sure. My contact information is on our website. That is WA-Asset. So if you look under the People tab on our website, WA-Asset.com, you'll find me, Joseph McNair, under the People section.
Okay, awesome. And I'll definitely make sure to put that up when I edit this so everyone can see it. Well, thank you for spending time with me today, Joseph. It's been great. And thank you to everyone else for spending time with us. I got to thank Redemption Plus and Bowling Music Network again for their sponsorship. If anybody has an idea for Think Tank or wants to be a guest, we would love to have you. So you just email me at candi@trainertainment.net and we'll get that set up. And then also just be sure to check out, we have a Peer Talks every Wednesday at 1 p.m. where people in the industry come together and just share ideas. And as we are starting to open, there's lots of good thoughts and conversations going on right now. That's 1 p.m. Central Time on Wednesdays. And on May 28th, I get to host a webinar about customer service this month. And so I would love for you to join us, same time, 1 p.m. Central. So thanks everybody for your time this week, and we will see you next week.